Anil bhai, you have joined, right? Professor Anil Kumar. I think Vikas.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
You have checked the voice, na?
Yes, sir. You have checked the voice.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Professor Anil Kumar has joined.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning. Neelakonda sir, good morning.
Very good morning, everybody.
Hi, sir. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Anil ji, good morning. Anil ji. Anil ji.
Anil ji is going to join soon, but
Acha, not joined. अरे भल अच्छा रे बाबू
हां चलছে sir
हां बहुत धन्यवाद मु बहुत आडे पठेइची लिंक टा मध्ये
this is a actually very eminent talk na
अरे quite eminent
we are lucky to have him today actually in fact yesterday also I shared with your classmate professor
हां मु बहुत पठेइची ओडिशा टू आरंभ करी चारियाडे पठेइची हमर स्टूडेंट्स पीजी स्टूडेंट्स ग्रुप रे पठेइची देखा जो केते जॉइन करचंती
हाँ एटा गोटे माने जॉइन करिया कथा कारण एटा एंथ्रोपोलॉजी
बिल्कुल ना बिल्कुल
टोटल
बिल्कुल एंथ्रोपोलॉजी सोशियोलॉजी इकोलॉजी सब जॉइन करिया कथा
समस्त
इंडिया रोटे स्टलवार्ट को सुनिया कथा चेंजिंग सिनेरियो रे
Hello. Hello.
Back by rejoin. Cancel just మళ్ళీ join.
Cancel చేసిన
Because
Yes, sir.
my voice is
Madhav
audible.
Gadgil, I have joined. Namaskar.
Namaskar, namaskar. Madhav sir has joined.
Yes.
And actually, my suddenly my
हाँ
laptop.
कोलकाता से माधव एसबी रोज
अच्छा अच्छा नमस्कार जी नमस्कार
नमस्कार कैसे हैं
हाँ बिल्कुल ठीक हो जी
हाँ बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है
हाँ मुझे भी बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है आपसे बात
हाँ
करने
हाँ
में
जी जी बहुत सारी मेमोरीज
हाँ
वर्किंग
हाँ
टुगेदर इन द बिगिनिंग या
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बहुत सालों की
SB Rai sir, good morning.
गुड मॉर्निंग गुड मॉर्निंग
Nice to see Madhav sir.
थैंक यू थैंक यू
Dean sir has joined. Viswabda, have you joined?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we start now?
हाँ
Yeah,
Okay,
I
okay.
think we can start. Yeah.
So a very good morning to all of you. I am Haricharan Behra. I'm a faculty member of the Sociological Research Unit at Indian Statistical Institute. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for all of us that the Sociological Research Unit of ISI is organizing such a distinguished lecture on sacred groups and biodiversity conservation, which is being delivered by none other than such a distinguished and renowned ecologist and also an anthropologist, I would say, Professor Madhav Gadgil. We are also very glad that Professor Biswabrat Pradhan, the Dean of Studies, ISI Kolkata, has also joined us. So without taking much time, in fact, I would like to invite our Dean of Studies to, in fact, welcome everyone and give an inaugural address. Dean of Studies, sir.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I welcome Professor Madhav Gadgil for this talk. Hello.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay. Thank you. In fact, it is my pleasure to invite you for this talk. We are really happy to see you here, although it is virtual. And I think we had, in fact, you need no introduction. We everybody everybody is familiar about Professor Madhav Gadgil and his works. So we are in fact waiting to hear your talk. So I think without wasting time, I would request Professor Gadgil to deliver your talk. I think sir, please you can start your talk.
Thank
That
you.
would be
Thank you
nice.
very much. Thank you. I am delighted, as I said, to have this opportunity. I had long association with Indian Statistical Institute, you know. My very good friend and close collaborator, Kailash Malhotra, was working at ISI in the, I think, anthropometry and human genetics unit it was. And we worked together, in fact, since 1977 onwards on a variety of projects. And I had the opportunity to visit ISI. And even prior to that, my father, D.R. Gadgil, was an economist. He was, I believe, on the governing council of ISI many years ago. And Prashant Chandra Mahalnabis used to visit us in Pune and stay with us. And I had also been to Kolkata with my father when I was quite young and seen the institution. Anyway, so it's a very long association and I am very happy to talk. And on a topic which is, I think, also of interest to the anthropologist, like Kailash Malhotra, with whom I worked, as I said. So please let us start with the PowerPoint presentation. And as the presentation advances, I will continue making my comments. So kindly let us have the PowerPoint presentation now.
Sure.
Right, Hosa. So the topic is sacred in the service of ecological prudence. The point of view I want to present is that there is a broad understanding, which is, I think is mistaken, that sacred grounds and other sacred localities are being maintained exclusively through religious sentiments, and that as the religious sentiments weaken, all these practices will disappear. But that is not at all so. As I will show you, there is a good understanding of the people about the ecosystem services that these sacred practices, including the sacred grounds, which would be our focus, provide. And I have spent a lot of time in the field, talked to people, and have plenty of evidence that they are very aware of the sacred grounds, ecosystem services. Now, this is one of the nicer sacred grounds. It is close to Pune Western Ghats. Regretfully, the Western Ghats near Pune have been thoroughly deforested through, I must say, primarily because of the corrupt practices of bureaucracy. The corrupt irrigation engineers, which had access to this area with a dam, Panshet Dam, and the corrupt, equally corrupt, or perhaps even more corrupt forest department, together have destroyed the Western Ghats. You can see in the background the deforested ranges. It is not people, but it is this corrupt bureaucracy which has destroyed it. But people have maintained this nice sacred ground dedicated to Goddess Janani. Next slide, please. And I spent a lot of time in the field, staying with them, talking to them, and they are this, well, not just that Jandi ground, but a number of other grounds in this area. There is quite a network of them, and they are very familiar with the services that these grounds provide. Let me go through them. So they perceived that they serve as a refugia for breeding populations of prey animals such as barking deer. The villagers from Madgaon, where this Jandi sacred ground was, they said that they, of course, are very fond of hunting and would like to hunt barking deer, but they do not hunt the barking deer inside the sacred grounds. So there is a population of barking deer sheltered in the sacred ground. Of course, when deer breed, there is in a way excess population which spills out, and the barking deer which come out of the ground are then hunted by the villagers. So they said, because of the ground with its refugium services, we have off and on the pleasure of eating, hunting and eating barking deer. Secondly, they were very much concerned with watershed services, and the grounds played an important role in making the keeping alive the springs in the area. The grounds very often were storehouses of medicinal plants which they valued, which had disappeared elsewhere due to deforestation. They were important for people working in the field or their cattle to provide shade at noon. Then, when there is an emergency, they told, I visited a sacred ground at a place called Gol, which they said timber had been extracted only once in their living memory, some 30 years ago, they said, when there was a fire which burned all the huts down in the village. Then they went and asked special permission for the god of the goddess to extract timber, which was gracefully granted to them. And then they had therefore, because of the ground, timber for construction in emergency. So this was prudence. In ecology, we talk about prudence, which means practicing restrained, sustainable use in the long-term interest. And clearly, the grounds were being protected not just because of religious sentiments. The religious sentiments was certainly attached, but because of the ecosystem services of which they were very much aware. The next slide, please. Very interestingly, British had, of course, in their own country, there is the famous story of the enclosure of the commons in Britain. The common lands of the villagers were taken over by the lords, and with villagers losing access to the common lands, the forest cover of Britain was rapidly destroyed, as was the wildlife. And there is the famous ballad of Sherwood Forest, where I forget the name of the, anyway, there is this hero in the Sherwood Forest who still hunts there, and who, in a way, because of the existence of the forest at that time, continual survival of the Sherwood Forest, there was animals for them to hunt. Anyway, the point is that in Britain, both the forest and the wildlife was more or less entirely decimated between 13th to 16th centuries. And it was these British which had now taken hold of India. And Francis Buchanan Hamilton was a surgeon of the British East India Company, which had conquered India. He was put in charge of Tipu Sultan's domain that had been conquered, and to make a survey of the domain. And he describes a sacred ground near Karwar on the Karnataka coast. And he says it's a device to keep the East India Company from claiming its rightful property. So the British wanted to claim all common property resources which had been guarded with great care by people of India, and because of which the early British travelers describe India as an ocean of trees. It was this ocean of trees now that the British wanted to rapidly drain for their own purpose. The next slide, please. But now there was a lot of discontent against the British destruction of the forest throughout the country. And it is speculated that the 1857, the War of Independence, the first War of Independence, was triggered, fueled by this discontent. And so the British decided after 1857 war to have more systematic forest management and justify what they were doing as in scientific interests of sustainable forest management, so to say, which was actually a pretense anyway. So coming back, but who should head the new forest department? The British had completely destroyed their own forests, so there wasn't a single Britisher who could head the forest department. But on the continent, Germans particularly had maintained the common property resources, and Switzerland, for example, is famous for its forest protected by the local communes. Anyway, so they went to Germany and brought in Dietrich Brandis as the first Inspector General of Forest in 1860. Now, Brandis, it seemed, so turned out, had deep sympathy for the people. He was a socialist by persuasion and people's institutions. So he has these forestry notes written in which he praises the extensive network of sacred grounds spread throughout India, which he has given examples from every part of India, and says that it is most regrettable that the network is being completely eroded under British rule. He had special praise for the sacred grounds of Kodagu in Karnataka, on Karnataka-Kerala border, you know. Anyway, the next slide, please. But the British rulers rejected Dietrich Brandis's advice, and they continued their assault on India's forests, including the sacred grounds. In ecological terms, this is triumph of profligacy, of non-sustainable exhaustive use, to make quick profits over prudence. From that time onwards, forestry has been carried out under the bogus guise of being sustainable scientific management, but only promoting non-sustainable exhaustive use to make quick profits over prudence and to fill the pockets of the money bags. I mean, all over there are examples where the bamboo, for example, for the paper mills, when the bamboo was being sold on the market in Karnataka when I first studied this at 1,500 rupees per ton, the paper mill was given bamboo at 1.5 rupee per ton, 1,000 times lower price. And the forest department very happily was providing these huge subsidies to the industry, and happily with the industry's concurrence, so to say, or involvement. And of course, there was all this corruption involved from the company, filling the pockets of the foresters and the politicians to allow the destruction of the forest resources. The next slide, please. Now, the question I want to pose is that let us look back and think of how prudent practices may have evolved. Prudent practices have obviously characterized many simple societies like the shifting cultivator societies, which actually in these Western Ghats, the Zanadi area and so on, the primary mode of subsistence of people was shifting cultivation, along with, as I said, hunting of the animals locally. So, how would these practices have evolved? And my mathematician friend Niranjan Joshi and I posed this problem and worked on some models of how this might have happened. So, firstly, of course, designation of resources as sacred could facilitate social acceptance and implementation. This is true. But people are fully aware of ecosystem services related benefits of protections sanctified as sacred. And so such practices may have evolved by following certain simple rules of thumb. Next slide, please. Excuse me for a minute. Today's so-called scientific prescriptions for conservation of biodiversity, they are little more than rules of thumb. And actually, some of these rules of thumb are utterly perverse. So let me take the example of the Wildlife Protection Act, which was enacted in 1972 and which has had a very, very unfortunate implication for the people of India. Because before the Wildlife Protection Act, Forest Department's tyranny was restricted to just the forested area, whatever 20% or so. Whereas after the Wildlife Protection Act, they have control over the whole country. And let me take one extreme example of what is happening under Wildlife Protection Act. Wild pigs are an important wildlife species, certainly, extremely fast breeding. Their populations proliferate very rapidly, and unless they are continually harvested, then there is just an enormous number of them which have very adverse impacts on especially agriculture. So wild pigs all over India today are invading agricultural fields and sometimes actually attacking people. People have been killed by wild pigs, wild boars attacking them. But by the Wildlife Protection Act, wild pig is a protected animal. And if you resist it so much, let alone you kill it, then you are a criminal. So the Indian Penal Code actually says that if a human being invades your property, like wild pigs are invading the agricultural property, and there is danger to human life because of this invader, then you are fully justified to kill it. But wild pigs are, of course, at a higher level than human beings. So even if human beings are, you can justify killing of human beings if they invade your property. If wild pigs invade your property and you kill it, no, you are a criminal. Wild pigs stand at a higher level than human beings, and their lives are more important than human lives, according to this perverse act. Anyway, so let me get back to what I believe Niranjan Joshi and I have worked on. How are these prescriptions derived from? They would be derived from long-term observations of particular ecosystems. And in the local communities, they have enormous store of practical ecological knowledge, and they are engaged in just to meet their day-to-day livelihood needs, observing the particular ecosystems and their ecosystem services. So next slide, please. So the basic decision rule that a harvester faces is whether to decrease, maintain at the same level, or enhance harvesting effort from one time to interval to next. And the simplest decision procedure is, I won't go into detailed mathematics, but point is that if effort goes up, harvesting and harvest goes up, then you increase the effort further, and so on. If the effort goes down and the harvest goes down, then also you step up the effort, etc. So these are very clear rules, rational rules. Applying them, next slide shows. Next slide, please. Shows that if these are applied without a refugium like the sacred graph, then inevitably the effort goes on increasing and increasing, and finally the resource is wiped out. The next slide shows another model which says that you have a modified decision rule, that when we increase harvesting effort, then you have a refugium and you also increase the refugium size, etc. And indeed, simulations, computer simulations show that with the refugium and with this kind of a decision rule, you will in fact have sustainable harvests and with complemented by refugia like the sacred grounds or sacred ponds and so on, sacred stretches of rivers which you also have. Next slide, please. So what it leads to is the system of plentifully patchy refugia. In ecology, we talk of some large and many small and so on. But this is what we will call plentifully patchy. There will be refugia everywhere. And that is what Dietrich Mandes has observed. India was covered by a network of sacred grounds. And of course, that meant that there was natural ecosystems, well-preserved natural ecosystems for all people to enjoy close to their own vicinity. Unlike today's system, where you have maybe the tiger reserves, a few large distant tiger reserves. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, anyway, no, please stay on with that. Please come back to the previous slide. Tiger reserves where only the wealthy people can go, and it is not accessible to the less wealthy people. And in fact, there is a lot of hue and cry that continually there is a displacement of the local communities from these tiger reserves. Huge outcry actually in the country about the displacement of the local inhabitants from all these tiger reserves. Anyway, now coming back, India, we are a country of great diversity of life and human cultures. You cannot think of India as something which is homogeneous with a certain one kind of lifestyle. No, we are a country with a mosaic of hunter-gatherers, shifting cultivators, peasants which are don't have very expensive inputs at their disposal, herders such as nomadic shepherds, green revolution farmers, which are generally with irrigation facilities, use expensive inputs, chemical and others. And we have in India urban industrial complexes like Mumbai and Kolkata and so on. So it's a mosaic of life as well as human cultures, and we have to think of it and approach it as this mosaic. Next slide, please. So, world over, actually, if you look at it, a variety of conservation practices have prevailed in the societies at different stages of technological development. Technological development primarily increases the size of the resource catchment, the size of the area from which a society draws resources. Next slide, please. So, the traditional system in the northeastern India, where the local communities primarily were restricted to drawing resources from local areas. They were primarily hunter-gatherers, shifting cultivators. They have practices like this in Meghalaya, very close to actually now the capital of Meghalaya, Shillong. Next slide, please. At the other extreme, we have Project Tiger preserves. As I said, just few and far between and accessible only to the more wealthy, and from which the less wealthy, the local communities are being thrown out. Next slide, please. So, if one looks at actually not only India, but also Latin America, where in many places you have good evidence of the practices of local communities, then you see basically that as the area over which a society draws its resources increases, practices shift. So in the horticultural societies, so-called, where the resources are drawn from very restricted areas, you have practices such as conservation practices like sacred grounds, sacred trees, sacred heroneries, where the certain breeding birds are protected, ponds, sacred grounds, on the coast, sacred lagoons in the Polynesia, Melanesia, and so on. Then, as the societies, agrarian societies, then there are hunting preserves. So there is this very interesting atlas of Mughal India, and this atlas is shown the various preserves of the local rulers. Many tiger preserves of today come from that. For instance, Bandipur in Karnataka was a hunting preserve of the Mysore Maharaja. The Rajasthan Maharaja's hunting preserves are include Sarishka and so on. And in the industrial societies, the conservation practices have gone on to embrace wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, and the industrial societies, in fact, draw resources from all over the world. In their catchment, so to say, is vast. Next slide. And the ways of implementing conservation practices have also changed with the scale of the society. Next slide, please. This is now again worldwide, if we look at it, including in places like India and Kenya and Australia and Scandinavia. Then you have, sorry, is there any problem?
Yeah, hello, please mute yourself to join not. Hello.
Hello,
Everybody
yes.
else, please mute. Hello.
Yes, this is Madhav Gadgil.
Hello. Kindly mute
Yes, sir.
yourself, others, please. Others, please. Sorry. Yeah, sir, please continue.
Okay.
Yeah, actually,
So
some
the,
disturbance was there, so I stopped. Yeah. Okay.
okay.
Sir, continue.
So the
Yeah.
conservation practices have changed from being just religious prescriptions to social conventions to legal enforcement, as in India today. But in places like they have gone ahead to provide positive incentives in some fortunate cases in India today. Next slide, please. So, I will take a few case studies to illustrate what has happened. So there is firstly a declining role of religious prescriptions and social conventions. Then there are difficulties with legal enforcement, but there is slow emergence of positive incentives in the implementation of conservation practices. The next slide shows these case studies. Firstly, the northeastern hill tribes. Gangtes are one of the Kuki tribes. So all this conflict going on between Maites and Kukis, Gangtes are one of the Kuki tribes. And I had a PhD student, actually he was registered at Indian Statistical Institute with Mohan Reddy. Then he was a Maite, and he was interested in the forest management practices in the hill tracts of Kukis, and so I worked with him and spent some time with the Kukis and so on. I will come to that. Then there is the Agricultural Society of Goa, a second case study. Again, I have personally been very much involved in that. And then the Community Forest Resource Management, as per the Forest Rights Act, the most recent Pro-People Act, in the Central Indian Tribal Tract. One case I will present is Pasgaon. Next slide, please. So, the northeastern hunter-gatherer shifting cultivator societies in the hill areas, they were under tenuous control throughout British regime. as with these Gangtes of Manipur Hills. Next slide. So when we did the field work, the Gangtes remembered very clearly what was the traditional system that they maintained. So there was agricultural shifting cultivation areas and surrounded by a ring of sacred forest. There were other patches of sacred forest and some sacred ponds and so on. That was how the landscape was prior to 1950s, they said. Next slide, please. So the process which was claimed, of course, by the British and then by the Indian government is one of civilizing and developing these areas. So in the 1906, the community-owned forest areas were declared as private property and chiefs were made owners of the property. There is in the rest of the India very serious misinformation that in the Northeast, the communities are still in charge of the forest and forest is being destroyed through improper maintenance by communities. That is not true. Everywhere it is the chiefs which have been made landlords and the tribal community ownership has more or less been wiped out. Anyway, in 1940s, the British wanted to fight the war in Southeast Asia. And in fact, in Manipur, Subhash Chandra Bose's army had marched and there is a place where he had reached in Manipur. Anyway, and when the roads came in the 1950s, the Christian missionaries followed. Next slide, please. It was really remarkable. Just one story I will tell. The Christian missionaries were so dedicated to propagating their religion that not any Indian university or Indian society, NGO or any other effort. The Christians translated Bible into the many dialects of Northeast. So the Kuki people's dialects, there were just a few thousand people involved, but there is a Bible in their dialect and so on. And with that kind of dedication, they managed to convert the most of the people in the hills into Christianity. Now, as soon as Christianity came in, then what they told was that sacred groves are pagan practices and you must discontinue them. You burn all these sacred groves. Okay, so there were on large scale, not everywhere, but on large scale, the sacred groves were destroyed on conversion to Christianity. But then there was this limited revival of safety forests as a fire break, which was in the play, had happened in this village Santing, where we did our, where Dadbar Shah Bhebab, this Indian Statistical Institute student who was jointly registered with me, made his study. This Santing village had revived the safety forest as a fire break. Next slide, please. Yes, here we are. There are these three cookies, and sitting on the ground is in the blue shirt is Mohan Reddy, and then I am kind of reclining. And then we are talking to three local cookies. Fortunately for me, these locals, there were some locals which were working in the border security force. So they could speak Hindi. and I had no difficulty. We could communicate. And they said that in this, what had happened was that during the shifting cultivation cycle, when the sacred ring of sacred forest around the shifting cultivation areas was removed, fire spread, and there was disaster. So the community decided to reinstate the ring of sacred ground around the shifting cultivation area. And this was what had happened. And actually, you see in the background this revived sacred ground. Next slide, please. So, in the hill tracts of South Goa, so this is part of Western Ghats areas, and I have done extensive field work in Goa. And 1 second, please. There is one particular village called Kaure in South Goa. There is now mining going on, and that mine is called Devpan Dongor mine. Now, Devpan means sacred ground and Dongar means the hill. So, the mine is on what is known as the Hill of Sacred Grounds. And the Forest Right Act, which came in force since 2008, has clear provision that such sacred areas of local communities should be protected. And so the whole Devpan Dongor is a forest, a community forest resource of the villagers. And according to Forest Right Act, it should be completely protected. But mining is making so much money that all this was ignored. Next slide, please. Then the Grama Sabha of Kaure village wanted mining either to be stopped or unanimously resolved to constitute a multi-purpose cooperative society and asked that if mining has to continue, then it should be handed over to them. They will mine very carefully without destroying local environment and so that the benefits will reach to the people. But there is no justification, but government has refused to register the society. I checked in Pune, we have this Institute of Cooperative Management, and I have good friends in the faculty. The Kaure people I invited to come to Pune, to this Vaikut Mehta Institute of Cooperative Management and discuss. And it was clear that there is no way government can refuse to register the society. But the government refuses because then it is very clear there is actually a Shah Commission report on illegal mining in Goa, and Shah Commission has officially stated that illegal mining throughout Goa has led to the accrual of 35,000 crore rupees of illegal gain to the mining industry, which they of course share with the politicians and the bureaucrats. And then there is no way that the politicians and the bureaucrats will actually do anything for the Kaure village, except what they did was their leader was Ravindra Velip. Next slide, please. And when this is a state of what this sacred hill has become. Next slide, please. When the protest continued, they arrested Ravindra Velip on flimsy excuse. And when he was in judicial custody at night, the mining industries, Gundas were let in, they tried to kill him. But fortunately, he cried and other prisoners in judicial custody came and he escaped with just a broken arm and the protests have continued. But this is the case that that is how the sacred grounds in Goa are being treated and people are being treated with all these illegal gains. Next slide, please. But let me come to something positive, something which is actually shows that there are signs, there are possibilities of hopeful progress. One of them is Pasgaon. In Maharashtra, this central Gadchiroli Chandrapur area, because of the posting of a very honest official, Kiran Kulkarni, I know her, this lady, as the deputy collector in the area, many Forest Right Act provisions have been implemented. And this is hasn't happened in all over India, but in this particular pocket, a number of villages have the community forest rights amongst other provisions. There are three kinds of provisions. Individual land related forest rights, then facilities such as local schools related forest rights, and finally the community forest rights. So the most important to my mind is the community forest resource right. And Pasgaon, this village in Chandrapur, has 1,000 hectares in 2013 became its community forest. And community forest resources have full rights over non-timber forest resources. They can harvest and market, for example, bamboo and other minor forest produce like gums, leaves, flowers, fruits, medicinal plants. And they are getting decent income, and income is used to for the villagers because it's in the disposal of their Gram Sabha for village and forest development. Next slide, please. So positive incentives here have promoted prudence. It is not that sacred grounds will disappear when the religious feeling goes. On the contrary, with the forest rights, the Pasgaon villagers have constituted a substantial sacred ground. New forest, new sacred grounds have emerged in this area with positive incentives, even though there is no question of religious sentiment promoting them. So the Pasgaon villagers, they started off, once they got these forest community forest rights over these 1,000 hectares, to provide complete protection to 30 hectares of the area as a newly constituted sacred grounds. They have also decided that although collection of Tendu or Kendu, this diaspora melanoxylon leaves was giving them income, but it meant setting fire to the forest, so they will stop collecting that. Next slide, please. It shows now, fortunately, with the Google Earth and so on, you have access to imageries which show the reality on the ground. And this is a satellite view. The entire area, green area is there, community forest resource area. And this area outlined in yellow is there, newly constituted 30 hectare. This is substantial, very substantial because this Madgaon and so on, they are at the best 10 hectares. This is a 30-hectare sacred ground. Next slide, please. And in that sacred ground, wildlife has returned, and there are these 2 dholes or wild dogs in the newly protected sacred ground. Next slide, please. Then they decided to stop damaging this Kendu or Tendu, these Diospyros melanoxylon trees, to pluck leaves and allow them to grow properly and bear fruit. And the fruit yield has increased manyfold once they stop fire. And indeed, these are very delicious, delicious fruit. They have a lot of market value also. They are not currently marketing them. They are just consuming them at the village level because they are also very nutritious part of diet. Next slide, please. So the conclusion is to be quite clear. We must empower people by conferring resource rights to them to protect nature and take away from these kinds of powers from tyrannical bureaucracy, in particular the tyrannical forest department. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present my experiences and point of view. And if you wish, I am quite willing to respond to any further comments, questions, and so on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for such a nice talk, this wonderful and this informative talk. Uh, I mean, in online, we cannot give this big hand. So once again, it is thank you, sir. We can take few questions. So please, if you have any question, you can make your video on, right? And then please ask questions.
Can I?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Namaskar,
Namaskar.
Professor Gadgil. I remember while working with Professor Madhav Gadgil, sometime 89 and 90, at the beginning of joint forest management, how the idea to involve people at the local level, and it was the first time that community were engaged in identifying the plants, their importance with a local name, and also what kind of uses are there. And this has worked together, and Professor Gadgil involved many institutes in the country, and the first time PBR, People's Biodiversity Register, was prepared, and this was adopted by the National Biodiversity Authority. But later, the format which Professor Gadgil has developed was simple, people-friendly, and people can make use at the local level. That format somehow was made very complicated, and they have put number of forms with the scientific name requirement. So what happens, this PBR is not prepared by the community. That was the intention. Professor Gadgil wanted that people will prepare. It is a People's Biodiversity Register. But I want to say here that People's Diversity Register has not been properly used because it was made very complicated. So the intention which was prepared with a very good, could not achieve it. But we remember many other contributions also, Professor Gadgil, in the case of ecology, people's participation. So I was very delighted, and thank you very much for sharing in the narrative way of beginning till having today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. If I may respond,
Yeah.
It is not that it is made complicated. It has done two things. Firstly, the managerial authority of the local communities, the biodiversity management committees over the local resources has taken away. And secondly, the intellectual property rights of the local community have been taken away. So the forest department, which has been put in charge of all the implementation, has done what it always does in its own anti-people way. It has completely disempowered people, and in its own interest made it compulsory for them to give their intellectual property to the authorities, which I know, I will not go into details, is sold at large profits to pharmaceutical industries. And this is why the people have lost interest in preparing these registers. And there is all sorts of charade going on anyway. So let's not get into detail. It's not complication. No, it is this deliberate taking away of the managerial authority and forcing them to make open their intellectual property. That has made people disinterested.
Can you please tell me, if it is simple, whether this PBR, the present one, maybe 3034 format, can be prepared by the people? Is it people's biodiversity register? Can people prepare it?
No. What we have suggested can be prepared, and in this again some places where I have had opportunity and some of my friends to work with people with the original provisions, it has been prepared. There is no problem.
You see, there are scientific name, botanical name required over there. Do you think the people can remember all these botanical name, scientific name about the cake? Is it possible?
It is not only possible, it is done. Today, you have applications such as Google Photo and Google Lens. I have in Gadchiroli village one boy who actually was one of our students in a forest management training program, Sadhuram Manavi. He is 10th standard failed because of the awful educational facilities available there. He has learned to use this Google Photo and Lens and taken pictures of a whole lot of local plants. He's exceedingly knowledgeable about the local flora, and then with this application gets the scientific names. And the botany teachers in the local Gadchiroli college have become his students. And they go around with Sadhuram Manavi, this 10th standard failed boy, to learn about the plants and get the scientific names, which you are readily getting. There is the monopoly, the old monopoly of the learned people, like the Brahmins of the old, who will not share any knowledge with the Shudras, is gone. The Shudras are able to access knowledge. And Sadhuram Manavi has in fact noted a ground orchid, and that ground orchid, the botany teachers with their access to the literature found was completely outside the known area of that orchid. So Sadhuram Manavi, 10th standard failed, is a co-author on a paper, on a scientific paper published in a scientific journal. The name of that ground orchid is Geodorum laxiflorum. Occurrence in this area. So what you think is the case is no longer the case in the modern age.
Hello. Yeah.
Okay, I mean,
Okay.
by
Yeah.
anything else
Okay. Yeah. So
you
can I
would
take
like to
any other
comment?
question?
Yeah, can I ask one question?
Yeah,
Sir,
please.
yeah. My name is Shashi.
Uh-huh.
I'm from Kerala. Now, there is a human-animal conflict which is very much uh, prominent in areas of national parks. Basically, yesterday, there was an incident happened in Wayanad where one woman was eaten by uh, eaten away. And this kind of conflict is emerging now uh, around the national park. I don't know, these are all problems with the only bureaucracy or the state, because politicians are saying that 1972 Wildlife Conservation Act is uh, there is an inability to now um, actually uh, what you call uh, address the issue.
No. Now I already told about this wild pig business. This wild pig Wildlife Protection Act is perverse, and I have checked with both people knowledgeable. I have a good friend who is the retired Director General of Police of Maharashtra and a retired High Court judge. Both have told me that the act is unconstitutional. Act which gives higher status to wild pigs over human beings, and of course to panthers and tigers and elephants over human beings, authorizes them to kill human beings with impunity, and your resistance is criminal, is simply unconstitutional. It goes against the human rights, and we must actually scrap this act. I have written extensively. I have a book called A Walk Up the Hill, Living with People and Nature, one of a scientific autobiography of mine. It is available both in English, but in Kerala, since you are from there, Mathrubhumi Books has published a translation, and in fact, it is selling well. They tell me there it is now in third reprint, and it has a chapter which looks very carefully at this human-wildlife conflict and the Wildlife Protection Act. So the act must be scrapped, and a system such as that in Scandinavia, where this is a scientific, clear recognition that wildlife is a renewable resource, and their numbers will go on increasing. And if there is no harvest, and humans have been harvesting wildlife all along, and in Scandinavia, you have local communities have been authorized to decide on what proportion of, let's say, their major wildlife species, moose, can be harvested, and licenses are given, and you have moose in abundance still in Sweden. I have gone it. I have spent quite a bit of time in Sweden. I have many friends and collaborators, and there are moose all over the countryside. At the same time, I have enjoyed moose kebabs in their residences. They said, yes, we have taken a permit, and I have a permit to shoot 2 more moose per year, and I enjoy the meat of the moose. There is no other country in the world which has such stupid and perverse act as Wildlife Protection Act, completely preventing killing of any wildlife species. No other country. And the most rational system is in Scandinavia, that is also shared by the European Economic Community. In the United States, there are other systems, but outside the national parks, people hunt. I was a student at Harvard, and I have myself had friends who were going out, have gone out on their hunts. So this is a completely absurd, perverse act which must be scrapped. And as in Scandinavia, the local communities must be involved in deciding on proper management.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any, I
Yes,
think,
sir, there is one more question
Hmm.
written by someone, Mr. Dev. He has written, to what extent are the sacred groves of Jharkhand and Odisha similar in terms of their cultural significance among the tribals, and how these similarities influence their preservation and conservation strategies? Gadgil, sir, over to you. If you would like to
Sorry,
respond.
I couldn't quite clear. I wasn't clear. What is the exact question, please?
Question is, to what extent are the sacred groups of Jharkhand and Odisha similar in terms of their cultural significance among the tribals, and how these similarities influence preservation and conservation strategies of sacred groups or forests?
No, as far as I understand, I have some friends actually from Jharkhand also who have worked with me, and I have personal experience of in West Bengal of Santals who are similar to many of the communities of Jharkhand you're speaking. And just like the Gadchiroli, Chandrapur, those communities, they are tribal communities. And as far as I can see, they have very similar capabilities.
Hello.
Okay, sir?
Mhm.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, please. I think if there is any other question, would it be possible, sir, to contact you over email?
Oh, yes, you
Gadgil,
have
sir?
my email ID. And
Okay, so
you
can it be shared? I think,
certainly
yeah.
ask people to contact me over email to ask for any further clarifications and so on, or any other comment they want to make. They're welcome.
Okay, fine. So I think we can stop here now, because so if you have any other question, you can contact over email, right? So
Can you share the email ID?
Yes, yes, we will
okay.
share the email ID, and also we'll probably, Professor allows us, then we can share the PPTs also.
Yeah, I can tell it. It is very easy to remember. It is just as in my name, Madhav, MADHAV, dot Gadgil, GADGIL, @gmail.com.
Sir, once more, sir. MA.
MADHAV dot
Okay.
GADGIL
Okay.
@gmail.com.
Thank you, sir. Thank
You are
you.
most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Most welcome.
Yeah.
I'll contact you
Dr.
on. Yeah. Mail.
Chairman, sir, would
Thank you,
you
sir.
like to give a concluding remarks?
Yeah. So this talk actually on this sacred groves and this biodiversity. So this is really a wonderful talk, and such an insightful that information. Really, many of the things we are not knowing. Such a talk, although it is online, but it was nice presentation. It was so useful. We are really we are very much thankful to Professor Madhav Gadgil for giving such a nice talk. Thank you, sir, once again for giving such talk.
Thank you very much. My
Yes, sir.
pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So should we
So we should wrap up the session then, sir?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Madhav Gadgil, sir, and thank you, Dean, for making this session wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.